Hi, Integration Television today is on site at Bluelink Associates. We have a feature interview with the president of Bluelink Associates, Mark Keynes. Hi, and welcome to the November episode of Integration Television. I'm your host, Robin Smith. We've had lots of great feedback on the September and October shows. The October show generated a lot of traffic on the internet, on the LinkedIn groups, and Andy Davies was a great interviewee. So today we have our feature interview with Mark Keynes of Bluelink ERP. We're going to talk. He and I are going to talk about data integration from the ERP vendor's perspective, and how he's seen things change over the years. And that's going to be an interesting interview. We've had a lot of comments on social supply chain. We got some emails in asking us, what is the social supply chain? And I thought it'd be interesting for our viewers to step back and maybe look at what the social media impact on business is. Found two very interesting documents that I'd like to share with people. One is a book by Eric Qualman. It's called Socialnomics, and we'll put the link up to the book. It is on how social media transforms the way we live and do business. The back of the book has some phenomenal statistics in it, some really interesting ones. That social media today now is bigger than pornography on the internet, which blew me away, because you hear in the press how big pornography is. We're not here to talk about that today. But some of the other ones that talk about the trends in Gen X and Gen Y relating to the use of social media, texting, and so on and so forth. So this is a fundamental shift in the way people are communicating, and the impact and the potential impact that has on business. So I encourage you to read this book, Socialnomics. The other report that we have is from Export Development Canada, which is a research report. It's publicly available, and we will make the link available on our website, on how online social media is being used for business purposes. Gives you a really good overview of how social media is having an impact in business and the kinds of things that it's being used for. So things like LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Vimeo for video hosting, and a variety of other social media platforms such as Foursquare and Gowalla are all things that people are looking at. So these two reports, for anybody who's interested in that social media, the impact of social media on business, supply chain, data integration, these two books will give, this book and this report will give you a really good foundation for understanding the implications and the impacts. Feature interview today coming up, and questions to our Twitter feed at VL Integration TV, and we have our Facebook page. Send us your feedback, send us your comments. We always appreciate that. And our feature interview with Mark Keynes is next. Welcome to Integration Television. Integration Television today is coming to you from Bluelink Associates in Concord, Ontario. I'm here today with Mark Keynes, the president of Bluelink. Mark, thank you very much for being on our show today. And Mark and I are going to talk about the data integration issues and ideas and perspectives from an ERP vendor. This is a different perspective than we've had on previous shows, because typically we've looked at it from the outside looking in. In today's conversation, we're going to have the look from the inside looking out. Any questions, any comments during the show, you can send them to our Twitter feed at VL Integration TV. We're happy to answer questions. So Mark, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Robin. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit about Bluelink and how you got into creating ERP software, because I think it's not for the faint of heart from what I see. So
yeah, well, as you know, everybody thinks that their business is a tough business, and probably everybody's right.
For sure. Oh yeah.
I think ours is a fairly challenging industry. There's no question. How I got into it, my background is as a chartered accountant, which is the Canadian equivalent of a US CPA.
Okay.
And I spent several years in public accounting practice as a partner in a public accounting firm, and hated every day of work. In fact, you know those Sunday evening blues when you're dreading Monday morning. I used to get them on Saturday afternoon.
So is that how the term Bluelink came out? Those Bluelink.
Well, not quite, but I mean there may be a connection there. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. So discovered computers, discovered the old microcomputers in the 80s.
Yeah.
Discovered that I absolutely loved programming, developing. Became a self-taught programmer and became a software developer. Worked for a few software development companies, became a consultant, and in the 90s decided to put the two areas of skill together, the accounting background, and in my public accounting days I'd mostly been involved in auditing entrepreneurial, owner-managed, wholesalers, distributors, those kinds of companies. That was
so
kind of where my background was.
So you'd seen a fair amount of the kinds of issues that people were running into.
In the early days, I'd certainly been working with companies that were purely pen and paper.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're going back to the late 70s and early 80s, and most of the clients that I had in the public accounting firm were not computerized. Those that were using mini computers or outsourced mainframes where they'd send away piles of paper and they'd get back printouts 2 weeks later. And that would be their computerization.
So this is how they manage their businesses?
This is how they manage their businesses, yeah. I mean, real-time information was a pipe dream. Monthly financial statements, you might get them 2 months after the end of the month that you're reviewing.
So kind of difficult to respond to trends and as things
Indeed.
were actually happening. Now, I understand you have a CAIT designation. What exactly is that?
Well, the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants implemented a number of specializations within the CA organization, probably around about 1998, 1999. They decided to create an information technology specialty designation. And I think the first batch of CAs who achieved that designation, I think there were about 109 of us or something. So I was amongst the first, in the first group. Mm-hmm. And that was largely performed with self-assessment, so you were kind of grandfathered into it. So to be fair, I didn't write any exams didn't have to prove my skills in any way other than writing some online and paper-based assessments.
Okay.
So it is a specialization. I believe there are now about 350 CAIT designated CAs in Canada. And it's actually useful. We have a forum where we do exchange ideas on accounting technology, and sometimes it's very, very useful when you have an off-the-wall idea that you want to bounce around with peers.
For sure.
And get shot down in flames, but in a good way.
But those peer connection networks are very valuable. I'm actually just in the process of reading a book called Super Connect, and it's about that exact type of forum where weak links are extremely powerful. So,
right.
So tell us about the genesis of Bluelink. You came out of public practice. You were sick of it.
I worked for several years for a couple of companies that developed business software.
Okay. And
I worked as a developer, an operations manager, an implementer, and then for about 4 years I worked as an independent IT consultant with a partner. We did consulting engagements, largely in the healthcare sphere, and most of our work was actually referred to us by public accounting firms who didn't understand computers and were terrified when their clients asked them for help. So we were like their lifeline.
Yeah, for sure,
Which was nice. It was good. It got us a good start, got us a really good network of referral sources for IT-related work. And then, as I say, in the early 90s, I started feeling that I wanted to build a product-based business that could take me back to my accounting and business consulting roots, use my information technology skills, and also, having looked at the kind of software that was available for your smaller entrepreneurial-based wholesalers and distributors, some of them were fairly good at accounting, but absolutely awful and abysmal at inventory management. And back then there were one or two that were pretty good in terms of managing inventory and supply chain, but their accounting modules were a joke, and not a very funny joke.
Yeah.
So that's what we thought. We could potentially build a better mousetrap. We could build a system which has very, very solid accounting functionality, but we could build supply chain, order processing, inventory management, purchasing, and other kind of operational functionality on top of that. And the vision that I had when I started the company, and I think our first customer went live in 1995, the vision that I had was that customers shouldn't have to be fitted with a straitjacket. So they should be able to have custom features, they should be able to run the business the way they want, and the software should be adaptable and flexible and work with them.
Flexible is a key word, and I guess that has served you very well. And so over the years since 1995, you've seen the data requirements and the data that the companies deal with, I would assume, exponentially explode. How have you had to change to that, and how have you seen your customers change? Have some stayed with the old ways? Have some sort of been more progressive about it?
Well, indeed, when you deal with owner-managed entrepreneurial type companies, you do get a fairly broad gamut of, let's call them business cultures or corporate cultures.
Yeah.
And you do get a lot of those companies that tend to want to stick with the old ways. There are positives in the companies that they tend to keep their staff for a long time. They don't have big staff turnover, particularly the good ones, the successful ones. But therefore you also have people who've been doing the same things the same way for 15 years and are not that receptive to change.
No, for sure.
So as you're absolutely right, the amount of data that flows in and out of a company, whether it be electronic data or paper-based data, has definitely increased. The kinds of business activities that companies do today compared to even 10 years ago, just think e-commerce as one example, has really multiplied dramatically.
Completely.
A lot of companies are still actually stick-handling that by either using paper or misusing paper.
So they've integrated the e-store, the internet retail space order to a piece of paper, and then somebody sits down.
And then somebody sits down and keys it in.
That's extremely efficient.
Yeah, and then there are certain other areas of let's call it quasi-data integration. So again, just using the web store example, I've seen, in fact, not that long ago, about 2 months ago, I walked away from a sales prospect because they were totally set in their ways and not willing to change. So their web store renders their orders to them electronically in an electronic format. That electronic format is an unstructured email. And then from that unstructured email, they insisted on going through a process of having one person manually key the order into the system off the email and then print out a report on the orders that were entered and have another person compare the report with the original emails that came in to make sure that no key punch errors were made and that everything was accurate.
So you think about the implications on their customer service, and in the internet retailing space, as you well know, time is of the essence.
Right.
And that customer satisfaction and customer experience is absolutely critical. So here's a great example of a company that sure, they've got that storefront, but they've lost sight. And dealing with that extra level of data now, it's almost like they're creating a process around it.
Well, what it's also doing is and it's not just this company. What it's also doing is it's actually stifling their growth potential.
Yeah, for sure.
It's actually forcing them to put off plans for expanding and improving their website to attract more sales because they can't handle the ones they have right now.
Yeah.
And I see that as a big growing problem. E-commerce integration in general is a massive. There's a massive opportunity for a lot of smaller companies, but it generates a massive potential problem in terms of being able to actually manage the orders.
Oh, I'm sure. And then the flip side of that is the data that comes back out. When you're buying on an internet portal, people want to have that knowledge and that satisfaction that order's been processed. And if there's a 48-hour delay in providing you with the information that your order's been received and here's your tracking number and so on and so forth, you're setting yourself up for a whole issue around credibility, and I'm sure that's the kind of thing that you've seen as well.
It goes even further than that with e-commerce sites while we're on the subject.
Yeah.
Because, for example, a lot of companies, it's interesting, a lot of smaller companies are almost stumbling into I call it the e-tailer market, the online retailer. They're wholesalers, they're distribution companies, they put up a website to see if anyone will buy it, and like in the case of one of our recent customers, within 2 years that became more than 50% of their business. Their business more than doubled in size in 2 years because of the
So that's
sales.
an interesting statistic. Wow.
But again, this presents problems. For example, if I'm buying something online and they ask me to put in my credit card, and I put in my credit card and it tells me I have been charged $100, I expect to be shipped $100 worth of product. What I don't expect is to get a phone call the next day, or even worse, the following week, saying, I apologize, Mr. Keynes, we didn't have those products in stock, so we can either ship you replacement products or we can credit you back your $100, or we can ship you half the products and credit you back your $50. So number one, that leaves a bad impression in my mouth.
Absolutely.
Number two,
Absolutely.
do you know how many extra people they have to hire to handle those kinds of interactions? Now, this is a situation where they're using an entry-level accounting or ERP system,
Yeah.
and they are to some degree being able to transport data between the website and the system, although it's in a very batch-based approach with comma delimited text files that you have to manually import and export. But they haven't thought through all the integration piece. For example, if your web store doesn't know how much inventory you have available, don't charge the credit card. Do a pre-authorization.
Yeah.
But then, if you don't have a fully integrated system, someone has to manually go and verify the pre-authorization, turn it into an actual charge, re-update the website, re-update the customer. So there are these little subtleties of data integration that even some web stores that think they're integrated with their backend actually don't have.
Yeah. Well, this is very interesting. Are there other areas within that data flow? I mean, we've talked about the web store, which is an exciting field today with the shrinkage in North American retail bricks and mortar. Everybody seems to have an internet store.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other areas that you're seeing where data integration has become a big issue?
Very much so. There are a number. I'll try and focus on one or two so we can delve in some depth.
Sure.
But the obvious ones are, of course, processing customer orders. The old, you're selling to one of the big box stores and they're providing you with EDI files.
Yep.
And the number of retailers that my typical wholesale distribution type customer has to trade EDI transactions with has dramatically increased in the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of an obvious one, and it is a problem for a lot of owner-managed companies, because what happens with them very frequently is they're mandated to trade data via EDI. They know nothing about EDI.
Yep.
They never heard about it before.
Yeah.
So what do? They look for someone who can provide them with an EDI solution, and unfortunately, too many of them look for they like the word cost-effective, the most cost-effective, but let's be honest, they look for the cheapest
solution. No,
they're looking for something that's cheap.
For sure.
And what happens is they often end up with these bait and switch merchants who, it's going to cost you X $100 or X $1,000 and that's it. And then as soon as the first test transaction comes in, they say, oh, you need to trade that kind of document. Well, that's a whole new ball game.
Sure.
We had one customer that we strongly recommended not going down this route. They were quoted $3,000 for everything they needed, just as the upfront cost and fairly low ongoing costs. They ended up paying this company $15,000, and they're still not up and running.
Wow.
And we told them, don't go that way.
Right.
But other areas.
So does that speak to much in the example you gave for the web store of not having a data integration strategy? That the entrepreneurial owner is so busy thinking about, I got to make my next sale.
Yeah. And this seems like a necessary evil to them rather than a strategic opportunity.
Yeah.
So exactly what they should be doing is they should be looking at the entire picture. What information is coming into my company from outside? What formats are they coming in? What formats can I get them in?
Yeah.
And what information what information do I need to send out? And what information that I don't currently send out could I be sending out that would enhance my business?
Interesting.
And then
idea.
let's see how we can automate the whole thing. I mean, a very, very simple example of data integration is, and most companies are doing this now, is, wind back 10 years ago, many companies were physically printing out an invoice and they put it on a fax machine and faxing it out to their customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now you're either faxing or emailing that invoice directly from your system. You don't think of it that way, but that's a data integration piece.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah. The other example that I'll give you with ERP systems, 10 or 15 years ago, if your suppliers, you purchase from suppliers, you warehouse the products, you resell them. 10 or 15 years ago, your suppliers typically were sending you updated product catalogs and price lists in nice glossy format. Maybe
that big book that they
exactly.
send out.
Maybe they might send it to you in a PDF document, but 10 years ago, not so much. Yeah,
fairly rare.
More and more nowadays, you can get that information from your suppliers in electronic format. which theoretically is great because you can then potentially import that information directly into your ERP system, not have to manually key thousands of new updated product styles, codes, prices, definitions, SKUs, UPC codes. You could just import them. The reality is that if you've got 40 suppliers that are sending you this data electronically, you're getting 40 different formats of data. You're getting a bunch of flat files, a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, a bunch of other...
You may even get an EDI document.
Yeah. So now what you do is you go to your you go into your ERP software and you say, can I create import formats that will import this data into my system without breaking the system? And for the most part, with the ones that come in very specifically structured formats, you possibly can, although you'll do a lot of work.
For sure.
And then as soon as a format changes, you're going to have to go back to the drawing board. And then with a lot of these files, you're just not going to be able to import them. So if you don't think about this as a strategic view on how to move data in and out of your business, what are you going to do? You're going to hire another 2 people to manually key this information in. So you're going to spend $120,000 a year on salaries instead of spending a little bit of time thinking about a strategy and then automating the process in a seamless way.
For sure.
It makes no sense to me, but this seems to be still very much a holdover of the old, I don't want to spend money on technology, but I don't think of salaries as an expense, oddly enough.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that that's something you see in a lot of businesses where the understanding around the technology is definitely not there. I read an interesting stat the other day that since 2003, so from 2003 to 2010, we have generated more data per capita than we had in the previous 200 years.
I can certainly believe
that's a phenomenal, and that's on an exponential curve up, which tells me that having that data integration strategy around the business and how it relates to that, I think is very, very critical. So this is some good advice, Mark. I think for the viewers and for the people looking to replace an ERP, an old, and God forbid, there are those people still running their DOS ACPAC out there. I've certainly seen them. But I think for people who are looking to grow and those that have outgrown their existing ERPs, and I think this is an issue. A lot of companies don't realize that they've outgrown their ERP. So I think this is some very, very good advice. So, do you have any final comments for the viewers in terms of any final gems of information or gems of advice there?
Yeah, the one piece of advice that I will give the viewers is take a look at your business internally. Don't assume that your systems are all working fine because your clerical staff or office staff are not complaining. Take a look at what they're doing, and some of the clues that you'll get to the fact that you're actually manually rekeying data which could be fully integrated would be how much time do your staff spend manually keying data into Excel spreadsheets? Yeah. You'd be shocked.
Yeah. That's a very, very good point.
Yeah, that's almost like clue number one.
Yeah.
Number two, do a little bit of an assessment of how much transactional business comes into your business via fax machines, surprisingly still a lot of those around, via email, so those 2 areas, and then take a look at how much time your staff are spending manually putting pieces of paper either onto a fax machine or into envelopes and sending them out the door.
Yeah. No, and this is excellent advice, Mark. Mark, thank you very much. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I think we may get some interesting feedback. So thank you, and it's been a pleasure to have you on Integration Television.
Great, it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Great interview there with Mark Keynes of Bluelink ERP, talking about some of the issues related to data integration from an ERP vendor's perspective. If you have questions or comments on the interview, we'd like to hear them. Send them to our Twitter feed at VL Integration TV, and we'll respond and send out answers and so on. Can leave them as well on our Facebook page and on our website, tv.virtuallogistics.ca. Thank you for watching the November show. We are excited to have Paul Faggy, Vice President at GS1 Canada, on for the December interview. And stay tuned, and we'll see you again in December.